Final episode of our Buyer Beware series, talking with the attorney and wrapping up kind of the take home and what I've learned and how I'm pivoting and changing a little bit and upping my skill on how I represent buyers. So we contact the attorney. I'm a very logical person. Like, this is wrong, so this should be done. And the contract states that we have access, we can do our due diligence. If it's not given, then the other party's wrong. In finding and learning out a lot, there's just so much to it, making sure that we share, although the contract states we can do our investigation during our due diligence period. How extensive is that investigation? For example, we were given access to do a septic inspection. We were given access to do a home inspection. Does the seller really have to give us access to then get estimates for what is wrong? Can we do additional inspections? Are the sellers allowed to refuse to let the buyers come onto the property? And can the sellers have things repaired or fixed, even though it's things that the buyer paid for and found, without letting the buyer know? And it's very gray. There is right and wrong, and in putting together an email and really looking at the 7 items that were misrepresented in this transaction, we could go to litigation. So it was a huge decision. Did the buyers want to fight and go to litigation and try to get their $25,000 back, not turn over their additional earnest money, which was another $25,000, and sue the seller? Or did we want to continue with the transaction? And we decided to continue with the transaction eyes wide open. The attorney, who was fantastic, McCall Law Firm, really guided us through this and said, look, here's really what could happen. We could go and we could fight. You just expect never to get your due diligence back. And we can go to bat and we can sue the seller for all of these things. Or we can move forward and take a different direction. And if we really feel like there's been misrepresentation or omittance or negligence with the listing agent, you can go to the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. So I left it and just told the buyers I would support whatever they would want to do. And moving forward in the transaction, which we decided to go, they realized that not only was the seller not going to give any compensation for the repairs that we found, that was kind of it. Like, we felt like we were taken advantage of. They wanted the house. They loved the house. Knowledge is power. We already knew the majority of what was going on with the home. And our attorney was full-fledged, like, you go ahead and you keep advocating, you keep fighting, you keep requesting, and document. So emails, text messages, everything in writing, to the point the listing agent was frustrated because emails were coming in. We were protecting our buyers and preparing if they did to report misrepresentation. And when you're reporting misrepresentation, you can say that the seller knew or the listing agent knew, but you have to have proof that they knew. And we did. It's permits on the portal. It's prior inspections that the listing agent and the seller have. The disappointing thing for me was my contract, clearly the responsibility of a buyer agent, the buyer, the listing agent, and the seller, but do we want to sue? Do we want to invest more money and time in doing so? Our clients were in a unique situation. This is our dream home. We're going to move forward. Let's review all the items that we have found. We were granted access for initial inspections, and we weren't allowed to come back on the property. The sellers have rights too. As a buyer agent, I continuously share with the buyers the facts. Here's what we can ask for. The seller has the right to refuse. If the seller refuses, here's what could happen. And we were doing that all along the way. But I was getting so frustrated because this is right. This is the right thing to do. Let us go back on the property. We only did inspections one day, and we were asking to go back a couple of times because there were significant things that were wrong, and we weren't granted that. So we moved forward. We closed on the transaction, and now here we sit with 7 items that have been clearly misrepresented. And now them living in the home, they're seeing more things that we were prepared for. We're taking apart and really looking into those items, and it's opening my eyes, disclosing things key. It's key on both sides of a transaction. So when I say buyer beware, I never want to scare a buyer. There's always risks. But what I want to say is buyer beware. There are some sellers and realtors that maybe don't represent to the best of their ability. Just because I hold myself to a standard, and when I make mistakes, I own them, learn from them, and figure out how to change things. Not everybody is that way. Although there's a lot of things in the contract, buyers and sellers don't have the money or time to go to litigation. And where does that get you? What does it mean for the earnest money? What rights do the seller and buyer have? So review that with your clients. And if you're a buyer or a seller, understand your responsibility. Ask the tough questions and investigate. Become a detective for your clients. And it's okay to be annoying. You're not going to be liked by everybody. And that's always been a challenge with my personality. I don't want to email again. I don't want to call again. This is someone's investment. So I am calling. I am asking. I will challenge. I don't take no for an answer. I'm not here to judge or say you should have. Why didn't you? If we find something, let's work together to fix it. So buyers, find a realtor in North Carolina that is going to go to bat for you, that's going to explain the facts if a situation or a transaction's not handled well. What are your rights? What can you do if you don't have the time or money to go to litigation and you want to go through with it and you really feel like you were wronged? What is misrepresentation? What does the commission do? All these questions are online. Ask your realtor. The biggest thing that you need to be aware of, or don't expect people just to give you information. Sometimes you have to dig and find out truths that even maybe the seller or the listing agent don't know or are not sharing. And what would you do if you had that information? When you're going to buy and you love a home, go for it. Eyes wide open. There are going to be hiccups, but it's partnering with somebody that's willing to investigate and go through those terms and find those answers and advocate for you to make sure that you get the best value when you're purchasing a home. Remember, in North Carolina, buyer beware, because your property is always assumed to be as is. When you see a 4-page disclosure or a property that's older and people are saying, or the seller saying nothing's wrong with the home, challenge that. Maybe there's nothing wrong today, but what happened yesterday? How old really are your HVAC units? What does the date on the system say? What happened? Call insurance companies. Talk to your realtor and say, what if something happens? Know the good, the bad, and ugly, and find a realtor that will get down and dirty during the transaction. So I hope you learned something. Any questions you have more about the transaction or what the attorney has shared with how we're going to proceed, I would love to share, as we're always learning, always growing. Until next time, Hooves and Homes Realty, have a